Hello and welcome to Indus News, live from Islamabad. I am Muneeb Hamid with the news of this hour. Let's begin with the top stories first. The Afghan government has reportedly offered the Taliban a power-sharing deal in return for an end to fighting in the country as foreign troops withdraw. According to reports, the offer was made by Afghan negotiators in Doha as the Taliban captured the 10th regional capital in less than a week. Taliban fighters have also entered the country's second-largest city, Kandahar. Pakistan has slammed the United States for only considering it useful in cleaning up its mess left in Afghanistan after 20 years of fighting. During an interaction with foreign journalists in Islamabad, Prime Minister Imran Khan said Islamabad is not taking sides in Afghanistan. The Prime Minister added that a political settlement in the war-torn country is looking difficult under current conditions. Meanwhile, speaking to European Union ambassadors, Army Chief General Bajwa said Pakistan has no favourites in Afghanistan and it only wants peace. Pakistan's Foreign Minister Qureshi says Afghan and Indian intelligence agencies are behind last month's attack on Dasu Dam. At a press conference, he said Afghan soil was used for the suicide bombing, which killed 9 Chinese engineers. He said RAW and NDS wanted to harm China-Pakistan economic partnership, but they failed in achieving their goals. North Korea says peace can only be achieved on the Korean peninsula if the US withdraws its forces from South Korea. In an interview, the North Korean envoy to Russia said Pyongyang will treat Washington on the principle of force for force and good for good. Sin Hong-chol said Pyongyang intends to ramp up cooperation with Russia to counteract the United States. And in football, Chelsea beat Villarreal 6-5 on penalties to lift the UEFA Super Cup for a second time in Belfast. Goalkeeper Kepa Arrizabalaga came off the bench to make 2 shootout saves and seal the win for the Blues. Around 13,000 fans witnessed the nail-biting contest in Northern Ireland, where the Super Cup was played for the first time. Well, these are the top stories, news in detail after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now let's have the news in detail. Start from Afghanistan, where the Afghan government has reportedly offered the Taliban a power-sharing deal in return for an end to fighting in the country as foreign troops withdraw. According to reports, the offer was made by Afghan negotiators in Doha as the Taliban captured the 10th regional capital in less than a week. Taliban fighters have also entered the country's second-largest city, Kandahar. Almost a third of the country's 34 provincial capitals are now under Taliban control. Meanwhile, the United States Embassy in Kabul has urged American citizens to leave Afghanistan immediately using commercial flights. According to the United Nations, more than 1,000 civilians have been killed in the past month. Just this week, thousands of people from northern provinces have fled their homes amid growing violence. Meanwhile, Pakistan has slammed the US for only considering it useful in cleaning up its mess left in Afghanistan after 20 years of fighting. During an interaction with foreign journalists in Islamabad, Prime Minister Imran Khan said his country is not taking sides in Afghanistan. The Prime Minister said a political settlement in the war-torn country is looking difficult under current conditions. Khan said Islamabad had made it very clear that it does not want any American military bases in Pakistan after Washington's exit. He added Pakistan convinced the Taliban for dialogue, but the behavior of Afghan President Ashraf Ghani shows that he is not ready for talks.
They are now trying everything to somehow get the Americans back into Afghanistan. You know, the whole posturing right now is that they're blaming the Americans for this debacle, Pakistan and the Americans. And they're trying to somehow persuade the Americans to actually intervene.
Imran Khan said he believes the US has made India its strategic partner now, and that's why it is treating Pakistan differently. Now, Pakistan's Army Chief General Qamar Javed Bajwa says his country has no favourites in the ongoing Afghan conflict and it only wants peace. He was speaking to ambassadors of European countries who called on him at the general headquarters in Rawalpindi. According to the military's media wing, regional security and matters of mutual interests were discussed in the meeting. General Bajwa said Pakistan values its relations with EU nations and wants to enhance cooperation at all levels. The visiting dignitaries hailed Pakistan's role in its regional stability. Pakistan says a comprehensive investigation into last month's terror attack on Dasu Dam shows the involvement of Indian and Afghan intelligence. 9 Chinese nationals and 3 Pakistanis were killed in the attack. At a press conference, Foreign Minister Qureshi said the attack was planned in Afghanistan. Qureshi said RAW and NDS wanted to harm China and Pakistan economic partnership, but they failed in achieving their goals. He went on to say that China is completely satisfied with the investigation and willing to expand bilateral cooperation. Pakistan has conducted a successful training launch of surface-to-surface nuclear-capable ballistic missile Ghaznavi. In a statement, the military's media wing said launch was aimed at ensuring operational readiness of Army's Strategic Forces Command. The ISPR said exercise was also carried out for revalidating technical parameters of the weapon system. The Ghaznavi is a hypersonic surface-to-surface short-range ballistic missile with the first version in service since 2004. It has an optimal range of 290 kilometers and is designed and developed by the National Development Complex. Now moving to North Korea, it says peace can only be achieved on the Korean peninsula if the US withdraws its forces from South Korea. This comes amid heightened tensions in the Korean peninsula, fueled by Washington and Seoul's joint military drills. The North Korean envoy to Russia said Pyongyang will treat Washington on the principle of force for force and good for good. In an interview, Shin Hong-chol said it is vital to strengthen North Korean forces. The ambassador argued only real force can ensure peace and security in the region. Shin added Pyongyang intends to ramp up cooperation with Russia to counteract the US. Meanwhile, North Korea remains unresponsive to South's hotline calls for the 3rd consecutive day. Now, a Palestinian man who was shot by Israeli forces in Jenin city or West Bank a week ago has succumbed to his wounds. Palestinian Health Ministry says Dia al-Din Sabarini was shot 3 times in the upper body by Israeli forces on 3rd of August. Israeli soldiers wounded 6 Palestinians with live rounds for resisting their raids on the industrial zone of Jenin. Meanwhile, the forces detained 8 Palestinians during raids on homes in occupied Jerusalem, Nablus and Jenin cities. Witnesses said soldiers ransacked homes and assaulted the victims before detaining them. They said the Israeli troops also injured dozens of people near Jenin and demolished a Palestinian shop in Nablus. Meanwhile, Israel and Morocco have reached 3 accords less than a year after both agreed to normalized ties. Israeli Foreign Minister Yair Lapid signed the deals with his Moroccan counterpart Nasser Bourita in Rabat. The 3 pacts include an air service agreement and one on cooperation in the fields of culture, sport and youth. The 2 sides also signed an MOU on the establishment of a political consultation mechanism between their foreign ministries. Lapid's trip will be capped today by the inauguration of Israel's liaison mission in Rabat. Morocco was one of the 4 Arab countries to establish diplomatic ties with Israel last year. Meanwhile, Sudan says it will hand over its longtime ruler Omar al-Bashir to the International Criminal Court, along with 2 other officials wanted over the Darfur conflict. Foreign Minister Mariam al-Mahdi said this without providing any time frame for the transfer. The decision comes amid a visit by ICC Chief Prosecutor Imran Khan, but it still needs the approval of Sudan's ruling Sovereign Council. Al-Bashir is wanted by the ICC over charges of genocide, war crimes and crimes against humanity in the region for more than a decade. The UN says 300,000 people were killed and 2.5 million displaced in the conflict, which erupted in the region in 2003. Prime Minister Abdullah Hamdok says Sudan is committed to seeking justice to meet the public's demands. Now in Zambia, polling is underway in the nationwide elections after a tense campaign dominated by economic woes and the COVID-19 pandemic. President Edgar Lungu and opposition's Hakainde Hichilema are facing off for a third time in the election. About 7 million people are registered to vote at more than 12,000 polling stations established across the country. The winning candidate must receive over 50% of the vote to avoid a runoff. At least 16 presidential candidates are vying for the seat. Now, at least 15 people have been killed in an attack in Bani Bango region of western Niger, close to the Mali border. In a statement, the Interior Ministry said the unidentified gunmen targeted civilians working in a field. This comes just weeks after 33 people were killed by suspected militants in the same area. Bani Bango falls inside what is known as the three-border region between Niger, Burkina Faso and Mali. It has been the scene of bloody attacks by terrorist groups for years. Now, an Ethiopian armed group, the Oromo Liberation Army, has struck an alliance with Tigray forces. Oromo is the country's largest ethnic group and was designated as a terrorist organization last year. It has now reached an agreement with the Tigray Liberation Front to cooperate against the government. OLA's leader, Komsa Deriba, says the only solution now is overthrowing the government militarily. In an interview, he said other groups are also involved in similar discussions and talks are underway on a political alliance as well. This comes as the Tigray conflict spreads into other parts of Africa's second most populous country. One is coming up after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now, Brazil has reported more than 900 deaths from COVID-19 and over 32,000 infections in the past 24 hours. Globally, the virus has claimed more than 4.3 million lives and infected over 204 million people. More details about the pandemic in this report.
As the global COVID-19 cases keep rising, the blatant disregard for the nations with lesser resources becomes more evident. The United Nations said a new U.S. practice of expelling asylum seekers to southern Mexico under COVID-related public health orders violates international law. This comes as the Pan American Health Organization said the death rate is soaring in Central America, while infections are also surging in Honduras, Belize, and El Salvador. Cuba is bringing back hundreds of doctors working abroad and converting hotels into isolation centers and hospitals. Meanwhile, the World Health Organization said the pandemic is spreading at a rate faster than ever.
Cases and deaths continue to rise. Last week, the 200 millionth case of COVID-19 was reported to WHO, just 6 months after the world passed the 100 million reported cases. And we know that the real number of cases is much higher. As I said recently, whether we reach 300 million and how fast we get there depends on all of us. At the current trajectory, we could pass 300 million reported cases early next year.
In Europe, France has reported more than 30,000 new daily COVID-19 infections for the first time since the 28th of April. Authorities said fully vaccinated people in England will no longer be legally required to self-isolate upon contact with a positive COVID-19 case. In Oceania, New Zealand announced plans to allow quarantine-free entry to vaccinated travelers from low-risk countries from early next year.
We cannot keep border restrictions on forever, and to be absolutely clear, we don't want to do that either, and neither do the experts we talk to. Border closures were only ever a temporary measure in order to keep COVID out before a vaccine was developed and administered. So long as the scientific evidence shows we can safely transition from a border defence to the individual armour of the vaccine, then that is the direction we will go.
Meanwhile, Australia's capital, Canberra, has also been ordered into a 7-day lockdown.
Meanwhile, Pakistan has recorded 102 COVID-19 deaths in the last 24 hours, its highest daily toll since May 21st. The Health Ministry says the fatalities count has reached 24,187. The Ministry said more than 4,900 tested positive overnight. It says the caseload has exceeded 1,085,000, while over 975,000 people have recovered. There are more than 85,000 active cases, of which nearly 4,600 are in critical condition. Meanwhile, Federal Minister for Planning Asad Umar says 40 million vaccine doses have been administered so far. In a tweet, Umar said the last 10 million doses were given only in 9 working days. Now, Iraq's Foreign Minister Fuad Hussain says his country wants to enhance ties with Pakistan. He said this during a meeting with President Arif Alvi in Islamabad. He went on to thank Pakistan for training Iraqi diplomats. For his part, President Alvi offered help in the reconstruction of Iraq by providing skilled and trained human resources. He added the international community must put pressure on India to stop the rights abuses in occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Later, Hussain met Pakistan's Army Chief General Qamar Javed Bajwa in Rawalpindi to discuss matters of mutual interest and overall regional security. Bajwa appreciated sacrifices made by Iraqis in their fight against terrorism and offered all possible assistance in development and defence-related fields. Now, a tourist helicopter with 16 people on board has crashed into a lake in Russia's far east Kamchatka Peninsula. Emergency services say 7 passengers and 2 crew members survived while 7 others remained missing. State news agency says the Mi-8 copter was carrying tourists from Moscow and St. Petersburg. Authorities say 40 rescuers and divers have been dispatched to the scene. The helicopter is reportedly lying at a depth of 100 meters in the lake. In July, all 28 people on board an aircraft died in a crash on the peninsula. Now, India has failed in its mission to put an Earth observation satellite into orbit. The country's space agency suffered a technical performance anomaly in the cryogenic stage of the rocket launch. Scientists at the Mission Control Center say the performance of the rocket was normal in the first and second stage. However, minutes later it was announced that the mission couldn't be accomplished as intended. The satellite was launched on a geosynchronous vehicle from the Satish Dhawan Space Center at Sihalikota in southern India. It was meant for quick monitoring of natural disasters such as cyclones, cloudbursts and thunderstorms. Now, Chinese astronauts on board the Tiangong space station have activated the magnetic levitation experiment facility for the first time. The China Space Agency said the scientific experiment facility includes a chamber of high-level microgravity. The Shenzhou 12 crew have spent nearly 2 months in a low Earth orbit in Tiangong's core module. The 3 astronauts in space station are expected to complete a number of experiments until mid-September. Now, in Turkey, 6 people have died in flash floods in Kastamonu province in the northern Black Sea region. The Disaster and Emergency Management Directorate says 1 person is missing in Bartın province. Authorities say 13 people were injured when their vehicles overturned after a bridge collapsed. There were power outages in a total of 31 villages across Bartın. In Sinai province, a house collapsed due to the deluge and cars were left stranded in the water. The weather department says heavy rains in the area are expected to continue over the week. Now, in Italy, the island of Sicily has registered 48.8 degrees Celsius, which is believed to be the hottest temperature ever recorded in Europe. Regional authorities reported the reading near Syracuse, which still needs to be verified by the World Met Organization. According to the WMO, the current official record in Europe is 48 degrees Celsius, registered in Greece in 1977. Italy's health ministry has issued alerts for extreme heat in a number of cities facing highest health risks. The latest heat wave in the country is being caused by an anticyclone nicknamed Lucifer, which is moving up from Africa. The anticyclone is expected to further raise temperatures in a number of cities, including the capital, Rome. Now, in the U.S., an enormous wildfire raging across northern California for nearly a month has burned down another 550 homes. Crews have contained only 30% of the Dixie fire, which is being said as the second largest in the state history. Details in this report.
Wildfires driven by massive heat waves have wreaked havoc in various locations across the world. 2 firefighters and a civilian have been injured in California's Dixie Fire, which has scorched more than 500,000 acres. The blaze that is being fought by nearly 10,000 personnel has destroyed over 1,000 homes, along with hundreds of other structures. Meanwhile, in Algeria, wildfires tearing through the forested areas in the country's north have killed at least 65 people. The army has been deployed to help fight the fires, burning most fiercely in the mountainous Kabylie region.
We are watching the fire to try to prevent it from spreading further, but it seems to be impossible, and now it reached our zone. All olive trees are burning. May God protect because it's near the village.
Turkey says it has brought 285 forest fires under control, while 3 continue to burn in the Aegean province of Mugula. In Italy, multiple blazes erupted in southwest, where a 76-year-old man died after his house collapsed due to the flames. Meanwhile, in Greece, around 20 villages were evacuated on the Peloponnese as hundreds of foreign firefighters poured to rescue the country. Flare-ups continue to ravage Evia, the country's second-largest island, just off the mainland east of Athens.
In this fire, due to the meteorological condition, the heat is very, very high. So the fire produces her own wind, and so the propagation of the fire is very quick. So to stop, it's impossible. We just reduce the flank to avoid the fire to spread all around the island.
Meanwhile, in Tunisia, wildfires burned in the mountainous west of the country during a record heat spike. The Meteorological Institute says temperatures reached a sweltering 49 degrees Celsius in Tunis.
Now, the acute fuel scarcity in Yemen due to a 6-year-long war with still no end in sight has forced citizens to resort to wood logging for a living. The trend has led to severe deforestation in the already war-ravaged Yemen. Details in this report.
More than 6 years of war in Yemen has killed tens of thousands of people and left 80% of Yemen's population reliant on aid. The fuel shortages due to a coalition blockade on rebel-held areas forced businesses and families to swap diesel and gas for firewood. Yemeni lumberjack Ali Al-Imadi is one such Yemeni who had to turn to logging in his northern Mahwet region to eke out a living for his family. Al-Imadi spends hours chopping down an acacia tree with an axe as his 12-year-old nephew helps out splitting logs. An economic collapse has wiped out the farming and building work he used to travel around the country for.
In the past, you used to go anywhere like Marib, Sada or Sana and you'd be able to make a living to feed yourself and your family. But now there is nothing. Now if you work for one day, it won't last for 5 or 4 days of food. So I decided to stay with my family. If I get something, we eat. At least we live or die together instead of being apart for nothing.
But with the demand for firewood soaring due to fuel shortages, there are now concerns that the country's humanitarian crisis, with millions facing starvation, has compounded the risk of deforestation. This threatens both the environment of Yemen and any hope of a long-term livelihood for men like Imadi.
It's a huge number, but in 1 year, 886,000 trees are felled in Sana, which represent 10% of the country's population or the area. So, if we multiply this by 10, the number becomes staggeringly high. Another study says that almost 17.5 tons of wood are burnt by bakeries.
Officials say some 5 million trees have been cut down over the past 3 years across the north in Yemen.
Now, in Indonesia, university lecturers have developed a robot that delivers food and good wish messages to people in COVID-19 isolation.
This robot is helping Indonesians pass through the testing times of the pandemic by providing food and entertainment to self-isolated COVID-19 patients. It has been assembled from electric household items like pots, pans, and an old television monitor. Renamed the Delta robot after the highly contagious variant of the virus, it has also been modified to spray disinfectants.
Karena dengan kondisi COVID,
with this new Delta variant and the surging number of COVID-19 cases, I decided to turn the robot used for public services into one that sprays disinfectant and delivers food and necessities to residents who are self-isolating. I'm shifting the function to serve only the members of the community who are in need.
The village where the robot operates is in the Surabaya, which is the capital of East Java province and Indonesia's second biggest city. It has been swept up by a devastating second wave of coronavirus infections in the past month.
This robot is only implemented for use in the village, so it is not classified as a high-tech robot. It is quite simple. For the base, a used toy car chassis was used. Then for the power, we used a battery. For the movement, the commands are set through remote controller, and we use an actuator system to create a signal to move the robot.
Indonesia has become the epicenter of Asia's COVID-19 outbreak and recorded more than 3.68 million infections. Meanwhile, the country has suffered 108,000 deaths amid the outbreak.
One news coming up in this news bulletin after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now, Mexico has built a towering replica of the Temple Mayor, the Aztec civilization's most sacred site in Mexico City. Spanish forces had destroyed the temple in 1521 and had razed the Aztec capital, the Tenochtitlan, after their conquest. This report has further details.
Founded in 1325, Tenochtitlan was famous for its elaborate Aztec temples and advanced canal system. Spanish conqueror Hernan Cortés first arrived in Mexico in 1518 on a mission to explore the region's interior for colonization. After the fall of Tenochtitlan, the residents were reportedly forced to destroy their temples and palaces. The Templo Mayor Pyramid, also known as Huitzilopochtli, was the center of Tenochtitlan's political and spiritual life. The Aztecs venerated two main deities at the temple with elaborate pageantry and sacrificial offerings.
Es el Templo Mayor.
It is the Templo Mayor, the most important pyramid of the sacred city of Mexico, Tenochtitlan. For the Mexicas, it was the center of the universe. It was the point at which one could enter the underworld and the different celestial levels.
Tenochtitlan is now the heart of the bustling megalopolis of Mexico City. The mostly white mock temple will be shown in the main square, the Zocalo, close to the ruins of the real Templo Mayor. This is the biggest ever replica of the Templo. Archaeologists say the original temple was as high as a 15-story building.
Tenemos aquí en el Zócalo es por primera.
For the first time, we have a monumental reproduction of this great Mexican temple destroyed by the Spaniards in the Zocalo. Besides, we have the possibility to see it with a height of 16 meters. All the scales models that have been done before are similar.
The foundations of Tenochtitlan are still evident in Mexico City, with constant excavations revealing more artifacts and insights into ancient Aztec culture. The site will be open to the public from the 13th of August to the 1st of September. People will also be able to witness light and sound spectacles, which will display Mexica myths and the story of Tenochtitlan's fall.
And the Wall Street stocks have opened flat as investors wait data showing a steady jobs market recovery. The S&P 500 traded marginally down while the Dow Jones Industrial Index was down over 0.25%. The Nasdaq Composite traded at a fraction up. Meanwhile, the oil prices remained steady after the U.S. call for more outputs, raising supply concerns. And now let's have a look at how the weather is doing around the world. Well, that is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.